to do the intended use and flow diagrams, but before we do, I just want to make sure that nobody's lost, nobody's wondering what the heck am I doing anyway. So what you're doing is you're putting together a HACCP program, which is going to make your operation better, and it's going to make you more marketable, both while you're in the military and after. All this stuff helps you to get promotions in and after the military and special jobs, so that's what we're doing. So now that we have our team together and we know what our products are, we need to figure out what are we going to do with those products. What's our intended use, which refers to any special concerns we have based on the type of operation that you have. It's relevant to the process if your customers are going to serve themselves. For example, are they serving from a buffet, or if the food is delivered by the servers? What's the difference? Well, on a buffet you get people dropping their tongs into the food, sneezing into the food, helping themselves. The chef's not out there to check the temperature at all times, so becomes more complicated, so we need to know if that's what we're doing. Ask yourself, does your target audience include a large number of immune deficient people? Kids, pregnant women, old people, sick people. Why does that matter? Obviously, people are old, people are sick, little kids have different immune systems, and so if we get into those situations, any one of those, we need to ramp up our food safety efforts, so we need to know that. So later on, when we get to the hazard analysis and we see that listeria is an issue, and we relate that back to pregnant women, and we say, oop, guess what, we're in a maternity hospital, so we need to ramp up our efforts. So that's why we need to figure out what's our intended use of the product. Preliminary step 4 is the flow diagram, the flow of the food from the lettuce in the field to the sandwich we serve to the customer. The flow diagram lists all the control points, which are then used to select which control points should be critical control points. The control points being those places where we can do something with the food, wash it, cook it, heat it, reheat it, to take care of the food safety issues. Using the information obtained in the product description that we already did, a flow diagram can be produced, which helps identify the way to fix the potential problems in the hazard analysis. So for example, as the food is flowing from the loading dock to the customer, there's different hazards that could happen at each step. So on the loading dock, a bird could fly over and poop on the box of lettuce, but that isn't likely to happen in the refrigerator. So that's why we're determining every place that the food is going to go, and then later on we will determine what could happen to the food at that particular stop. So what does construct a flow diagram mean? That's a clear, simple description covering all steps, even optional steps like reuse of the product in the food operation. So where did that ground beef go from the loading dock to the freezer, to the refrigerator, to the prep table, etc. And includes reuse of the product means, what if you take the steak that's left over from today and you use that for fajitas tomorrow? That would be a reuse of the product, so we're going to include that in our flow diagram. What that does is helps you with identification of the potential hazards. We talked about that on the last slide. So on the loading dock, there's different potential hazards, such as it's out of date, it's not at the proper temperature. Then when you get to the prep table, maybe the person didn't wash their hands that's preparing the item. You get it to the serving line, maybe the serving line temperature is not proper. So that's how knowing where the product is at all times helps you to identify the potential hazards. If you look at page 13 in the HACCP implementation manual, I'll have you read some of that as we go through. Otherwise, I'll have you read it, the part that's appropriate to what we're talking about. Read that in the book. So I was sitting on a plane one day and next to a professor, and we got to chatting, and he gave me the idea, when I told him what I was working on, he gave me the idea of relating the flow diagram to a GPS for food. So in a GPS in your car tells you to drive 0.2 miles, and then you're going to make a right turn. So you know that as you approach that turn, you need to look in your rear view mirror, make sure there's nobody on your butt, put on your turn signal, so take appropriate steps to make sure. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then you're going to get crashed from the back, or you're going to miss your turn. So a similar thing, and then what happens? You make a right-hand turn, so think of it as lettuce. So the lettuce comes in the back door, goes down the hallway 100 feet, takes a right, goes into the refrigerator, but before it goes into the refrigerator, you're taking it out of the box or whatever you're doing. So just read that and see if that makes sense to help you to understand what a flow diagram is. So here's what a flow diagram looks like. This same diagram is also on page 14 in the HACCP implementation manual, so just take a moment to look at that. You can see on the left SOP number 1 at pre-prep, so the SOP would be the standard operating procedures that you have in place for pre-preparation, which would be like thaw the ground beef under refrigeration at 41 degrees, clean and rinse the vegetables under cool running water. Those would be your standard operating procedures, so you just put SOP number 1 instead of having to define the whole clean and how to clean and rinse your vegetables. CCP number 1 on the left, we haven't come to that yet, but that's where you would list the critical control points. And so this is kind of what it's going to look like at the end, so you know what the end looks like as you're building it. So this is what a flow diagram would look like. Now, as part of the organizing process for this course, you should have gotten your book, and you should have gotten a couple of forms, one of which is the flow diagram form. You can do it on any piece of paper, but I provided a flow diagram form for you. What is the flow diagram? Again, it's a clear, simple description of where the food stops as it moves through the kitchen. Something happens, you refrigerate it, you cook it, you serve it. Those would be control points, and that's what's listed on the flow diagram. So you must identify all the control points. Every place that that food stops, somebody puts it down outside the refrigerator, and then the walk-in, let's say, and then somebody else who runs that area is going to pick it up and put it in the refrigerator. That's a control point. That's a place where something could happen. Somebody needs to do something with that product. That's a control point. So we're going to do a flow diagram. Again, we're working with that meatloaf with my famous recipe of turkey ground beef, and also has veal, but for the purpose of we don't want to spend our whole life doing this practice program, so I just made it simpler with 4 items: turkey, ground beef, eggs, and celery. You're going to do a flow diagram. Again, just imagine your operation. You're welcome to do it in your operation if you wish, but we're going to imagine the flow of turkey, ground beef, eggs, and celery from the loading dock to the customer. Of course, you can't confirm the flow diagram because you don't have a facility, but then again, you can go to your facility maybe tomorrow if you have one, and do this in real life, and you could do an actual HACCP plan for your actual facility if you choose to do so. So this is the beginning part of the flow diagram. What I gave you is looks like this, and it's got the turkey breast, ground beef, celery, and eggs. They all come into the loading dock, refrigerated receiving or frozen receiving. I made the ground beef frozen. I made the turkey breast fresh, just to give you 2 different scenarios to follow them through the kitchen. They would all then go to the refrigerated or frozen storage. From there, I want you to do your own flow diagram down to the trash. So remembering the product description that you did, that gives you in words, and now you're going to put that into boxes of the flow of the food. So where does this start? Let's say with the ground beef. Where does the ground beef go? From frozen storage, you're probably going to defrost that, right? So from frozen storage, you draw a line down, draw another one of those rectangles like that, and put refrigerator. From the refrigerator, where is it going to go? Draw another line down. It's probably going to go to the prep table, right? Where is the turkey breast going to go from refrigerated storage? Remember, it's just refrigerated, not frozen. Where is it going to go to? Probably to the same prep table. So do the best you can, and on the other end you can stop this show and do that, and then in a couple of slides we'll show you what mine looks like and see if you got it right. So you're drawing rectangles to represent each control point, each place that food stops and something is done with it. So here's what my flow diagram looks like. Now again, this is your operation, so yours could look different, and that's fine, as long as you got every place that food flowed from the loading dock through the customer in your operation. That's the point of it all. So let's look at this for the turkey breast. It went from refrigerated receiving to refrigerated storage, and then it went to the prep table. The ground beef went from frozen storage to the thaw box and then to the prep table. The celery went from refrigerated storage to the prep table. Now in your operation, maybe it would go to pre-prep, where they might clean it and dice it, but in this case we're saying that the chef is going to do that. And then the eggs went from refrigerated storage to the prep table. So at this point, everything is on the prep table, right? The turkey breast, ground beef, celery, and eggs are all on the prep table to be put together. We put them together in the mixer. So we drew the next control point was the mixer, a place where stuff could happen. We could contaminate the food there, and so that's a control point. So we put it in the mixer. From the mixer we brought it back to the prep table. Why? Because we had to put it in pans, right? We had to take the mixture full of food and pan it out. Then we took those pans and we put them in the oven. From the oven we brought them back to the prep table, because remember, we needed to change pans. We put them in clean pans, covered and dated. From there we put it in the refrigerator. From the refrigerator, when it was time to serve, we brought it back to the prep table. From there we took it to the oven, then to the food warmer next to the serving line. Then we put it on the serving line and threw it in the trash. So that's the flow of all of those food products. Now we're going to do all the food products. We would do everything from the salt and pepper to the ketchup to whatever we put on or in that product. Okay, does that make sense? So this is called a flow diagram. Why do we do all that? Because now we know that, okay, it's in the mixer. What could happen in the mixer? Well, we dropped our earring in there, or we didn't wash our hands before we put that, or we didn't wash the mixer properly from the last item. What could happen in the oven? We didn't cook to a proper temperature. What could happen on the prep table when we brought it back? Piece of the plastic that we put over the item fell into the item, whatever. Okay, so that's what the flow diagram should look like. Any questions, send me an email at ehmanley.com.